Welcome to Son of a Glitch. Join us as we explore some of the internet's craziest glitch stories. Story 1. Yesterday, something really strange happened to my mom and my sister, and I honestly don't know if it was just a coincidence or some kind of glitch in the Matrix. I was at work between 1 to 2 p.m. when my mom texted me, saying she was going to have lunch with my sister. We chatted for a bit until she stopped replying. Later that afternoon, when I got home, she told me the weirdest thing. She said she was in her bedroom. For context, our apartment is laid out like this. When you enter, there's the living room and dining room, then a hallway with the kitchen, my bedroom, my sister's empty bedroom, and finally my mom's bedroom at the end. From her room, you can only see the hallway. While in her room, she clearly heard my sister come in, the front door opening, keys jingling, the sound of her purse and jacket being dropped on the chair. Even the cats that were sleeping on my mom's bed woke up and ran to greet her, like they do every day. But no one ever walked down the hallway. My mom got up to greet her, but there was no one there. Later, my sister told us that around noon she had texted my mom about having lunch together. She left her phone on the bed while she went to shower and get ready, but when she came out, her phone was gone. She tore the whole place apart looking for it, moved the bed, stripped the sheets, checked every corner. She even used Find My iPhone, but it only showed that it was somewhere in her apartment. She got so frustrated that she ended up calling her boyfriend on Discord from her PC to ask if maybe he had accidentally taken it, but he hadn't. After about an hour of searching and crying, she checked her room one more time, and there it was. The phone was lying right in the middle of the bed, completely in plain sight, as if it had been there the whole time. This freaked me out so much that I joked. Maybe the parallel universe version of my sister didn't lose her phone, managed to leave on time, and actually came home for lunch. What do you guys think? Glitch in the Matrix? Story 2. I took a small fishing trip this weekend with 4 lifelong friends, all of us in our 50s. We stayed at my boss's house, somewhere I've stayed many times before, and it was just us. We spent most of the time eating, drinking, fishing, and playing poker. Early on the first night, I kept feeling that someone was missing. I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't as though a specific person was supposed to be there and wasn't. It felt more as if someone was there but somehow absent. The feeling came on randomly. I'd be sitting there, look around at my friends, and count, always just the 5 of us. By the second night, the sense that someone was missing became overwhelming. I finally mentioned it to the group. One friend turned white and said, "I can't believe you just said that. I've had the same feeling all weekend." Another admitted he had been counting heads more than once because he felt someone wasn't there at certain times. The other 2 didn't feel it at first, but as we talked, one of them began noticing the same strange missing friend sensation. The 5th friend said he never experienced it. None of us are especially religious or inclined toward the paranormal, but we wondered if it might be the spirit of a friend who passed away a few years ago, though that seemed unlikely since he never liked fishing. We also considered that it could be one of our fathers, since all of our dads have died. Mostly we were just trying to make sense of it. I don't believe in an afterlife, so I brought up simulation theory and suggested, half joking, that the system had temporarily removed one of our close friends for some reason. My friends thought that idea was worse than ghosts. Just thought I'd share the experience and see if anyone has had something similar, or any ideas about what it might have been. Thanks for listening. Story 3. I am really freaked out by an experience my daughter and I had last week. We were selling Girl Scout cookies in front of a Walmart early in the morning. Not busy, just the 2 of us with our little table, boxes stacked, and a thermos of coffee. People drifted by. I told my daughter, who's 15, to say good morning to anyone who walked past to be friendly. A while later 2 men walked out of the store. I had noticed them come in separately earlier, so seeing them exit close together caught my eye. They weren't together, maybe 10 feet apart, and each had a distinct look. One was a big biker type, broad-shouldered and rough. The other was hunched over his phone, earbuds in. I gestured for my daughter to get their attention and say good morning, but she refused. She said the biker looked scary, and the phone guy seemed distracted. She didn't want to be rude. We watched them walk across the lot. Maybe a minute later, we saw them again. Exactly the same clothes, same distance between them, same way they exited. It was like watching the exact same clip replayed. We both froze, looking at each other like, did you just see that? The timing, the spacing, everything matched down to small quirks. The biker's gait, the tilt of the phone guy's head. I tried to find a normal explanation. Maybe they went back in, walked around the building, took different doors. But nothing fit. It didn't make sense that both would leave, re-enter, and exit in the exact same pattern within a couple of minutes. The hair on my arm stood up. It felt less like coincidence and more like a tiny fracture in the morning, a repeat event that shouldn't have been possible. I couldn't let it go. I followed one of the men to his car and asked him directly if he had left the store twice or if he knew the other man. He looked at me like I was crazy and said no to both questions. He didn't react like someone who was hiding anything. His response was flat, like he'd been interrupted by an odd stranger. That made it worse, not better. If he was lying, why not react differently? If he was telling the truth, then what did we actually see? After that I walked back to the table, and my daughter whispered that she felt the same chill. We tried to rationalize. Maybe our brains filled in a repetition because of fatigue or stress, maybe déjà vu. But neither of us felt like it was just a memory glitch. It landed in us as a shared, undeniable thing, like catching a skip in a record together. I've replayed the scene in my head dozens of times, searching for an ordinary cause. I checked small details, the biker's jacket, the phone guy's backpack strap, the exact distance between them, and they're the same every time. The fact that we both witnessed it makes it feel impossible to shrug off. It's not a private hallucination or a misplaced memory. It's a shared, precise repeat that leaves no easy door to normality. Story 4. This happened a few months ago, and I've been meaning to post it here, but it honestly freaked me out so bad that I didn't want to write it out for a while. I'm curious about any similar experiences. Some background. I live in College House, owned by the college and close to campus, with 2 of my friends, but my boyfriend has been a sort of unofficial 4th housemate for a while now. He's good friends with many of my friends, and especially the ones who live in the house, so it's safe to say they know him and what he looks like extremely well. This is important later. Our house is directly next to a big parking lot which fully lit with street lights at night, like a grocery store or mall parking lot, that belongs to one of our college's sports facilities, and it's completely empty about 80% of the time unless there's a game or practice. This is where my boyfriend and any friends who come to visit will park when they come over. The night this happened, my boyfriend was at his fraternity house for an event, but was planning to come over to our house afterwards. Just me and one other friend were awake, and both sitting together on our front porch talking, not drinking or anything of the sort, when we saw my boyfriend's car coming down the road parallel to our house and the parking lot. It's also important to note that boyfriend has a very distinct car, foreign car, outside modifications, unusual color, and we live in a relatively small town where I have still to this day never seen anyone with the same car. I wasn't sure for a second that it was him, as he usually calls me on his way home from almost anywhere, and he hadn't done that, but as his car got closer and started to turn into the parking lot, I was absolutely certain it was him. Like I said, the lot is fully lit up at night, so not only did I see the car in full light, but I could see through the window enough to see it was him. We thought so much, so it was him, that friend, and I got up and started walking to the lot to greet him. She got over there just a moment sooner than me and waved at him as he was pulling in, but he only looked at her and just kept driving through to the other side of the lot. As it would be in character, we thought surely he was fucking with us and was going to turn around, but we watched as he pulled out of the parking lot fully and drove down the road in the opposite direction he came. I called him immediately, thought maybe he left something at the fraternity house, or was just doing a really elaborate and now slightly annoying bit. When I tell you my jaw dropped when he answered, and I could hear from the background that he was still at the frat house, music, people talking. Even though I could still see his car driving down the road, I asked him if he had just been home and left for some reason. He said he hadn't, but he was probably going to leave soon. He asked why, and I just told him I'd explain later, and hung up. My friend was so freaked out she didn't want to talk about it, and still doesn't like it when I bring it up. We both saw him, but she definitely got a better look and swears on everything it was him driving. Hell, I know for absolute sure it was his car. We've had a few other weird experiences in this house that oddly enough center around my boyfriend, and it's hard to tell if it's more paranormal or glitch in the matrix, but this one absolutely felt like a glitch, especially considering that him coming down our road and turning into that parking lot is a routine thing that happens at least 10 times a week. Guess the universe was just ahead by a few minutes that night and played the track of my boyfriend coming home too early. Story 5. I started a new job a few months ago. I met David, and we instantly vibed. He showed me around the office, helped me whenever I had a plethora of new person questions, and we sat and had lunch together one of the days. This man was literally a few feet away from me. I could study his features. He sat in my office a few times when he had free time. Again, I saw his face clearly. All of this happened in the same week. The next week, a new face stands at my door excited to see me and asking about my weekend. I didn't recognize him and must have looked confused because I saw his face drop. I almost asked if I knew him, but it was too awkward to. I figured it's someone I met briefly the week before. I went to David's office at lunch to ask him about the coworker, but instead of David, I found the coworker in David's chair acting like he belongs there. He would have been startled to be discovered in someone's office, door closed if it weren't his. I played it off casually, trying not to look confused again. Just made small talk and left, scratching my head, might I add. At the staff meeting, everyone was calling the coworker David and carrying on like that's always been David. I swear on my life that's not the man I met in my first week. David had brown eyes, brown hair, and was thin. This coworker has blue eyes and is stocky. The hair color is the same, but not the styling. Even their clothing styles are different. I was in so much disbelief that I actually studied the thumbnail on his email profile picture, looking for any signs of old David. The new David only greets me in passing, but nothing further. He doesn't stop by my office on his breaks, or interact with me outside of the polite hi in the mornings. I don't blame him because from his perspective, he probably thought I was standoffish when I didn't recognize him. I want to tell someone badly because I'm so confused, but who could I tell without sounding crazy? I've had no recent falls, no substance use or prescribed medication. I don't drink or smoke. I'm healthy and fit in my 30s. I have no other explanation for this. I'm dumbfounded and still trying to process it. Nothing else at work or at home is out of the ordinary. I see old David's face clearly when I think about him. I don't understand how a completely different human is living his life and nobody but me seems to be aware. This experience is single-handedly the most confusing thing to have ever happened to me. I am adamant that new David is not the man I befriended in my first week. Thoughts? Story 6. My partner, our 10-year-old daughter, and I decided to make our go-to-weeknight dinner. Roasted cabbage wedges, potatoes, and smoked sausage. It's the kind of easy meal that feels like an old friend. Slice the cabbage, quarter the potatoes, toss everything with oil and salt, and shove it in the oven. Total hands-off time, usually 45 minutes max. We've done this a dozen times this month alone. We started at 6 p.m. on the dot. Oven preheated to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Music on, kitchen lit in that warm, familiar way. Everyone had a job. My partner was in charge of the sausage, I handled the potatoes, and our daughter did the cabbage because she likes tearing the wedges apart. We talked shit, cracked jokes about the week, and cut like a small, competent assembly line. We even set a timer, because that's what normal people do when they don't want charred dinner. Everything felt normal. The smell of the sausage hitting the hot pan, the way the cabbage edges started to brown, tiny clouds of steam when we opened the oven door to check. It felt cozy, domestic, utterly mundane. At around 6:45 the timer went off. The potatoes were golden and tender, so we pulled them out and left the cabbage in for another 10 minutes. The wedges need a little extra time to get that charred bit we love. Then the weirdness started. We sat down at the counter to check our phones while waiting those 10 minutes, playing around with a recipe video for seasoning tips. Our daughter leaned against the counter, scrolling goofy memes, and my partner was half laughing at a text. The oven light came on when I opened it to peek. Everything smelled exactly right. Then while we were all standing there, right there, the clock on the microwave caught my eye. 10:03 p.m. I blinked, thought maybe I'd read it wrong. Then I looked at my phone. 10:03 p.m. I asked my partner what time it was. He looked up from his text with the same blank look and said, 10:03. Our daughter frowned and said, "Why is it dark outside?" Like it was a casual observation. For a second none of us said anything. The house felt smaller, like someone had shrunk the world to that one moment. 4 hours had passed. We did not, in any conceivable way, lose time. Nobody napped. Nobody left the kitchen. There was no Netflix marathon, no phone battery blackout, no blackout of consciousness. We literally watched the cabbage for those extra minutes. We argued, lightly, about whether to add more pepper. My partner walked back and forth opening the oven. The daughter stirred the potatoes. But somehow, without any of us being aware, the clock had jumped. The oven absurdly was fine. Nothing was soggy or burnt. The cabbage wedges were perfectly roasted, edges crisp without a single carbonized corner, potatoes fluffy and golden. The only thing that wasn't right was the time. We double and triple checked every timepiece. Phones, microwave, oven clock, bedside clock in the hallway. 10:03 everywhere. I even pulled up the lock screen on my phone to see the notification timestamps. Text from 6:01, 6:12, then silence until a timestamp of 10:03 on a message I didn't even remember receiving. My partner checked the camera app thinking maybe we'd recorded something by accident. Some weird time-lapse, nothing. The security cam footage from the porch showed a normal evening, cars, a neighbor walking a dog, but it also seemed to skip. There was an odd blank in the timeline between roughly 6:15 and 10 o'clock on the footage review, like the feed had a hole that shouldn't be there. Our daughter was the first to get scared, in that quiet, literal way only 10-year-olds can be. She asked if maybe time travel was real. We laughed at first, because what else do you do? But there was that same tiny, creeping chill under our skin as the laugh died. We tried to rationalize for an hour: glitchy clocks, phone battery issues, a weird DST bug, electromagnetic interference. We came up with scenarios that sounded plausible when we whispered them to each other, but none of them stuck. We ate in a kind of daze. The food was perfect, which made it worse. If something supernatural had happened, why would it be so considerate as to keep the roast untouched? Now, hours later, I'm replaying every sensory detail. The scrape of the knife, the tiny pop of the sausage casing, the smell of cabbage caramelizing. I can still taste the tang of the dressing we put on after it came out. But the timeline has a jarring seam in it, where 4 hours have been stitched in, and none of us can explain the thread. Has anyone else experienced this? A glitch? A time vortex? A synchronous clock error that happens to 3 people in one kitchen? I'm not into paranormal stuff, but I also can't sleep thinking about how calmly the whole evening unfolded and how suddenly we were plunged into night. If anyone has a grounded explanation that doesn't require me to accept a plot twist from a sci-fi show, I need it. Otherwise, I'm left with the unnerving certainty that something in our kitchen, somewhere between the oven and the countertop, decided to skip its script and leave us with a perfectly roasted mystery. Story 7. Me and Joe were driving down a busy street late one night, around 1 a.m., headed toward a little greasy spoon place we liked. The neighborhood was quiet in that peculiar after-midnight way. Porch lights flickering, the occasional dog barking, a strip of yellow haze from sodium lamps that made everything look a little softer, a little sleepy. We came up on a 4-way intersection where the traffic lights were set to flashing. Our side had the flashing yellow, the cross street had flashing red. As we rolled closer, I could see a car off to our right, about a block away, inching down the road. It wasn't close, but it was in motion. I remember saying out loud, without thinking too hard, "I don't think that guy's going to stop." Joe, who had this deadpan way of answering exactly what you were thinking, said, "That guy's not going to stop." It was the kind of throwaway chorusing that happens between people who've spent too many late nights in cars together. We both watched as the car kept coming, and in that same slow, quiet instant the world packed down into the single thing that mattered: whether the other driver would obey the red. I pulled up to the intersection and stopped. The other car didn't even slow. It just blew through the red light, tires whispering over tar. We both said the same thing in that breathless way that makes the mundane sound like a headline. He didn't stop. Looking back, that little back and forth was weird. It felt like our words were a script we'd both read beforehand. The whole thing had a surreal, cinematic quality. 2 guys, midnight, a street lamp, and the precise timing of something that could have been dangerous. We shook it off, shrugged in that "what are you going to do" manner, and continued on to the restaurant. The eggs were fine, the coffee too, and the moment slid back into the ordinary calendar of our lives. The strange part came the next night when we were, for reasons of habit or laziness, driving the exact same route again. We were talking about nothing in particular: work, the show we'd been half watching, some trivial gripe, and out of nowhere I said, "Joe, we shouldn't have been able to see that car last night. All those houses are in the way." The more I thought about it, the more the memory rewound like a film I could pause and study. The stretch of road where we'd seen the other car is lined thick with old houses, porches, hedges, driveways, fences that butt up close to the sidewalk. Mature trees crowd the strip between streets, their branches forming a kind of low canopy that catches headlights and breaks them up. There are no big gaps, no breaks in the houses, no vacant lots, no clear sight lines that would give you a full block view of an oncoming vehicle. You can't even reliably see someone's headlights from where we were if they're a block back. The trees and the fences hide the angles and scatter the light. I drove that intersection dozens of times over the following years, sometimes alone, sometimes with other friends, and I'd test it in my head and in reality. I'd slow down, try to peer around hedges, angle myself in different lanes, and every attempt confirmed the same stubborn fact. There's no way we could have seen that car approaching from a block away the way we both described it. The layout simply didn't allow for that line of sight. At first I tried mundane explanations. Maybe the driver had been on a different street the night before and took a shortcut, appearing where they shouldn't have. Maybe my memory was stretching, making the block look longer than it was. Maybe Joe, who was with me, had some weird clairvoyant smirk. But none of those explanations sat right. The physical geography of that corner is specific and, in my experience, unambiguous. The trees, the fences, the way the houses jut forward, they don't change, and they definitely didn't shift between one night and the next. Story 8. Many years ago I was visiting my friends in another country, Denmark, because they were getting married. I was joined by my mother and her partner. I had to buy a dress for the occasion, so a few days before the wedding the three of us went shopping on Straget in København. I was really optimistic about finding a dress, but it turned out that most of the shops only had stuff that I didn't like. The colors that were in fashion that summer were rather dull emo. It started to rain a lot, and we had been walking around for hours, but I finally noticed a store that I had always liked a lot. It's a chain, and me and my mom went in there, while her partner smoked a cigarette under a little vestibule outside of the store. It barely shielded him from the rain, but he was happy to be able to finally have a smoke while we looked around inside. He smoked a lot. I will never forget what we saw inside. The store was full of people, but also the clothes were beautiful. They were almost exclusively in colors that I like, lots of purple dresses in all shapes and sizes and skirts that had patterns from gold, purple, and whatnot. I said to my mom that this was definitely what I needed, and I would be buying lots of things, not just one dress, and she agreed. Even though this shop was mostly for younger women, she saw things that she wanted. We both had wet hair and clothes from the rain, so we decided to come back again the day after and go straight to this store, because we didn't want to be trying stuff on while wet, and we wanted to have lots of time and not leave her partner standing outside for long. Also, this store, unlike the others we had been to that day, was full of people. It was on 2 floors, and we could only see the stairs leading to the top floor, and glimpsed a tiny bit of what was up there, but judging from what was downstairs, we were sure it would be just as great. So we left, went straight home, and I was giddy with excitement about the next day. I don't like buying clothes for myself, and this is the only time I have ever been giddy about clothes shopping. Now on to the next day. We go straight to this store. It was a bit of a walk from the bus stop, but right away I noticed something was off. It had the same sign outside, so it was definitely the same place. A drugstore I had visited before going in there was still across the street, but there were some things that didn't look the same. I shook off the feeling and went in, really excited as was my mom, but inside the store there was nothing but the same dull stuff that was in every other shop that year. Boring colors, etc. And it looked completely different in every way. I remember my mom's disappointment. She ran up to the woman working there and asked if they had changed everything overnight. She was like, "No, we only bring in new stuff once a week." There was no second floor either. Literally nothing looked the same inside. We had to face facts that we weren't going to be seeing any of those beautiful clothes again. One other thing we noticed after coming back out was that the vestibule that my mom's partner had stood under while smoking in the rain wasn't there anymore. I have often wondered about this, and me and my mom used to talk about it a lot, and she was sad about it for years. She's really into clothes. It's probably the only time me and her bonded over clothes. And I wonder what would have happened if we had bought anything there. And is stuff like this possibly happening more than we think? I've only ever heard one similar story, where a guy working in Iran went to a really nice diner in a mountain village that was on the 2nd floor over a gas station. Everyone he worked with said he was making it up because it made no sense that a fancy diner would be operating in such a remote place, but he took them there one day, really excited to show them that he was right, and then when they get to this particular village, which looked the same as most others in the area, everything looks just as he remembers. The same gas station is there, but there is no 2nd floor. He remembered it being the best dinner he had ever had, and so cheap that he couldn't believe it. I can still vividly remember the interior of the store and the beautiful clothes I saw that day. I would describe them as dreamy. Another thing that made this store different from all the others was that it was full of people. There are lots of clothing stores on Straget, and none of them had been particularly busy that day. Far from it even. Then why would this one have been so crowded and full? Anyway, this is one of the strangest things that has happened to me. I was making a list of stuff like this while watching the TV show Dark with my husband. He thinks strange stuff is always happening to me, but he agreed that this was probably the strangest, and the fact that my mother experienced it too, and her partner who doesn't believe in anything supernatural, makes it impossible to deny. Story 9. On my daughter's birthday, I had to run an errand to pick up a balloon inflator that a friend had kindly offered us. My wife and I had talked about it in the morning, but we didn't agree on a time, and she never gave me the friend's address, so I completely forgot about it. Later that day, I wanted to get some pots for planting to have my plants ready for the party. I searched Facebook Marketplace and found someone giving away 10 nice pots. We agreed on a price, and I went to pick them up. I had the seller's address on my phone and entered the house number into my car's navigation. For some reason, I was convinced the house number was 22. I knocked on the door, and to my surprise, my friend opened it. She looked confused since we hadn't arranged a time for me to pick up the balloon inflator, and I was equally confused as to why she was answering the door. She was in the middle of a video call and told me to wait a minute. Still puzzled, I quickly asked, "Are you living with Lucy?" Lucy being the person selling the pots. She frowned and said, "Lucy? No, wait a minute." I went back to my car to check my phone and realized the actual address was number 26, not 22. My friend then came out with the balloon inflator and said, "I didn't know you were coming to pick this up. Hope it's useful. Say hi to your wife and enjoy the party." I asked again, "Do you know Lucy?" She laughed and said, "Oh, Lucy is my neighbor." At that point, I had to explain, "Look, I actually came to pick up some plant pots, not the inflator. I wasn't planning on getting it today, and I didn't even know your address." She looked confused. I was confused. Then I knocked on Lucy's door, explained everything, and, honestly, nobody really understood what had just happened. The city is huge, with at least 100,000 houses. Google Maps had no idea about the party, the pots, or the balloons. And to be honest, I'm still confused. Story 10. I lived in an extremely small village in Africa from 2016 to 2018. I was 16 through 18 then, and there are some days from back then that still crawl under my skin when I think about them. One of the worst was a blistering summer day in 2017. My grandma sent me out to buy groceries from the little street shops that cluster along the main dirt road. A bag of rice, a bunch of onions, and a carton of eggs. The whole errand should have taken 10 minutes, tops. The street was doing its usual thing, goats picking at scraps, a man repairing a bicycle under a flimsy shade, kids running with bare feet, and wild laughter. The air smelled like dust and frying oil, everything heavy and sunbaked. I was standing at the counter, handing the vendor money for the eggs, when the sound cut in. First a single angry voice, then a chorus. People yelling, but the tone wasn't just loud, it was full of hate, like something old and animal had woken up in them. I looked up, and across the street a crowd had formed. They were surrounding a woman. She couldn't have been more than 50, ordinary face, colorful wrapper and scarf, the kind of clothes everyone wore around there. Nothing dramatic about how she looked. But the way people were shouting at her, the venom in their voices, it felt like a lynch mob over some petty crime. They were throwing sticks, stones, and even small bits of rubbish. She flinched away from every hit, wrapping her arms around her head, trying to shield her face. She had this terrified, stunned look, like someone who's been slapped awake and doesn't know the world anymore. The woman behind the counter where I was buying my eggs muttered something under her breath, crossed herself, and said a short prayer. When I asked, quiet and stupid with curiosity, what was happening, she answered in a flat tone, "She's a witch." Like that explained everything. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. I remember thinking, Jesus, what kind of backward bullshit is this? But the weirdness wasn't just that people were brutal. It was the way they acted at once, like this was normal and like they were afraid. They cursed at her, spat, called names in the local language that made me cringe, and some were crying out prayers at the same time. The woman kept stepping forward and away in a crooked, frightened path, trying to go somewhere, anywhere, but the street around her was packed. There were no alleys for her to slip into where I was standing. It was a straight stretch with houses and tiny shops bolted up to the road. And then, in a heartbeat, literally a blink, she was gone. 1 second she was there hunched and covering her face, shoulders shaking, and the next second there was nothing but space where she'd been standing. No shove, no shadow running behind a wall, no smoke, no hole in the crowd. One splash of sunlight over hot clay, and she vanished like someone pulling a sheet off a statue. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I'd faint. I remember tasting metal in my mouth, a raw, cold fear that felt almost physical, like someone had punched the air out of me. People screamed louder, more frantic now, as if the disappearance had confirmed their worst suspicions. Some started doing louder prayers, louder exorcisms. Others ranted at empty space, as if the missing woman was still there, tormenting an invisible thing. I stood stupid and frozen, clutching my bag of eggs like a talisman. The vendor slapped my hand as if to say move, but I couldn't. I must have looked pale as a sheet. After a while, it could have been minutes, it could have been an hour, time became slippery. My grandma's neighbor leaned over and said, almost too casually, "She's a witch. Everybody knows her." As if that cleared everything up. As if the fact made it less insane. I asked questions because not asking felt like letting my head explode. Who is she? Where had she come from? Had she been a witch forever? The answers were the same, blank, unhelpful, like a chorus reciting folklore. They knew her, they said, and she'd been feared for years. One man spat on the ground and muttered that she'd cursed his goat last season. I told my grandma when I went back, trying to make the words normal, but she just shrugged and said something like, "Yes, she's a witch. Everybody says so." Her tone had the weary, resigned finality of people who've accepted the world with all its ugly corners. I wanted to scream that people weren't allowed to erase other people like that you can't just vanish and leave no trace. She answered like it didn't matter, because to them, it was how the world worked. To this day I have no clue what I saw. Memory plays tricks, I get it. Fear amplifies, faces blur. But that moment, the woman turning, shielding herself, and then the absolute, impossible nothing where she'd been, is etched in me. It wasn't a special effect, nor was it a sleight of hand. There was no smoke, no trapdoor, no magician's flourish. Just a woman who cowered while the village rained abuse on her, and then she blinked out of existence. Story 11. Not sure if this is the right place to post this, so if not, please direct me to a different page. I've been debating whether to share this, but it's been on my mind for a long time, so here it goes. Apologies in advance for the lengthy post, but I think it needs context. This incident happened about 3 years ago. I work in healthcare as a patient care technician, basically a CNA, but in a hospital instead of a nursing home. During this particular night shift, my responsibility was to sit with a confused patient to keep him safe. He had dementia, so he would try to get up, wander around, or pull out his IVs. My job was to make sure he didn't get up on his own, to prevent falls, and to keep him from pulling out any lines. This kind of sitter role is pretty common for confused patients in hospitals. The patient was in his 80s, and he was so confused he didn't even know his own name or where he was. Things were going smoothly. He fell asleep around 11 p.m., but then woke up around 1 a.m. and looked over at me. To get my attention, he said, "Hey, Victoria." That's not my name, but since he was confused, I didn't think much of it at first. I told him my actual name and asked if he needed anything, but he kept calling me Victoria 3 more times. Here's where it got strange. My parents almost named me Victoria. It came down to that, or my real name. They ultimately chose my name, because my dad wasn't a fan of Tory spelling. The names aren't even similar. I asked the nurse if this patient had any family members named Victoria, or had previously had a nurse by that name, but there was no connection. No family member, spouse, or prior caregiver with that name. Trying to shake off the odd feeling, I told myself it was probably just his confusion. But a short while later, he started singing the theme song to the Beverly Hillbillies. And that's when I really got chills. When I was little, my parents used to recite that theme song as if it were a bedtime story when my siblings and I asked for a story. The whole situation gave me an eerie feeling, like this man somehow knew things about me, even though we had never met. There's no way he could have known any of my family. This was in my college town, far from where I grew up. I might be overthinking it, but years later, I still think about this night and the unsettling feeling I had. Has anyone experienced anything similar, or have any thoughts on this? I'd love to hear any insights. Story 11. I still don't know how to explain this, but I will try my best. A friend of mine and I went to a mall called A+, near our neighborhood to dine. On the top floor, there is a local fast food chain restaurant most people know and eat at. We sit down, order, eat some chicken and salads, then leave. I also go to the gym in the same mall, and after 2 days when I came back to work out, the place is gone. Not just closed, but turned into another establishment over the course of 48 hours. I asked the employees what happened to the other place, and they look me in the eyes like I am crazy. The guy who owns the place told me he doesn't know what I am talking about, and I need to leave. The name of the place, the signs and furniture, all different. Completely different place that was obviously changed, but no one acknowledges the existence of the place we used to eat at. I asked a couple that was sitting there as well, but they said they don't know what I mean either. I know it could have been bought and renovated, but the fact that no one is saying anything about it, and that it has happened in 48 hours, or maybe even less, is disturbing. I asked other business owners as well, but no one seems to know anything. I feel so weirded out. What is causing them to hide the truth like this? I don't drink or smoke, and I am 20. I could really use some help. March 11th, first edit. I decided to keep you all updated on this. I will be going back in a day or two, before this Friday. But someone advised me to go on the original day the event happened. Said it would increase my luck of going back, so I am somewhat confused on what to do. Should I go on Saturday, the day we ate together, or Monday? I decided to ask you all since you have been very helpful about this. Thank you. March 12th, second edit, going back tomorrow. I will try to figure out whatever this is. Story 12. So I graduated from university in 2020. I remember one of our classmates passed away due to COVID. Didn't really know him that well. Our conversations never got past greetings. Fast forward to last week, we had a reunion, and I see his brother at the reunion. Later find out it's not his brother, it's him. I was too afraid to say anything. Didn't want people to think I'm crazy. And I couldn't backpedal and say I'm joking, because joking about someone's death in our culture is extremely insulting and considered a bad omen, and I didn't want to be that guy. So I just spent the evening acting causal and talking to people normally. Someone pulled out our graduation photo, and we started talking about it. He's not there. And when I asked him why he didn't attend, it was a great day, you missed out kind of way, not confrontational, he said, I don't remember, must have been busy, and that confused me even more. Asked my friend that I'm still in touch with and meet on almost a weekly basis, and he said, thank you, so I'm not the only one. And I have no idea what to make of this. I thought maybe he just got COVID and there was just rumors that he died. Aside from the fact spreading rumors about someone's death is extremely frowned upon, no one just forgets they got COVID. Who the hell misses their graduation? If you do, it must have been a big deal, but he doesn't remember. I specifically remember people posting, you'll be missed, and RIP Instagram stories. I dismissed it as a false memory until my friend said he remembered it. My wife, who was my girlfriend during graduation, remembers me mentioning a classmate's death from COVID, so I know I'm not misremembering things. There's no posts about his death on my friend's timeline, and his Facebook has been inactive since 2018. I'm sure it's him, not someone else, because no one died before graduation, or even a year after, except him. What could this be? I'm not saying it's a glitch in the Matrix, but it's fucking weird. Story 13. This happened to me just a few minutes ago, and I'm still feeling weird about it. Returning home, after I got off the bus, I called my mom to let her know I was about to arrive. I could hear my little brothers and my father watching football in the background, and she was making dinner. Around me, some people at the bar, people walking around the street. Nothing out of the ordinary, really. Then 5 minutes later I arrived home and loudly said, hello everyone, as always. Nobody answered. I thought, okay, maybe they didn't hear me. So I went to look for my family. The TV was turned on, someone was watching football, but the living room was empty. The kitchen was empty, but the lights were on. The bathroom had the lights on too, but also empty. I looked everywhere. Every single room. I started getting weirded out, but maybe they went to my grandma's in the other building's floor. I swear the house was empty except for me and my pets. The cats were chilling though. But when I checked my balcony, this got even weirder. The street was empty. I could only hear the crickets and animals. No cars. No people. The bar was open, but I couldn't see people in the terrace, even though it had a couple of families when I walked past them. Scary. I went to my room because I still had my backpack on, and I wanted to leave it. But honestly, I was starting to get unsettled. And then suddenly my mom appeared on my door, looking surprised. The conversation was something like this. You're already here? I didn't listen to the door. Me, where were you all? Nobody was here. What do you mean? We didn't leave. Me, I said hi and nobody was at home. Weird. Maybe we didn't hear you. We looked at each other super confused, but she changed the topic and I didn't say anything else. And yes, my father and brothers were watching football in the living room, sunken in the sofa like they never left. And the cars and people returned. Everything was normal. No, I didn't listen to the door before she came into my room. My room is right next to the house entrance. I would have listened to it. I have no explanation for this. But it felt genuinely scary for a minute there. The silence, man. Story 14. About 4 months ago, my mom had knee replacement surgery, and they sent her home the next day. After 3 days her leg was kinda red and significantly more swollen. She also had a fever, so we decided to go back to the hospital. This was around 10 p.m., and it was dark. I was driving, Mom was in the passenger seat, my 12-year-old daughter was in the back middle seat. We live in a very rural area, and after about 10 miles we hadn't met one single other vehicle. It's that rural. LOL. Along this stretch of highway, there are a few really tight curves that have a 30 miles per hour reduced speed limit sign. No flashing lights or anything else, just a yellow metal sign. There's a creek on one side and a steep cliff on the other, so no shoulder, no driveways, nowhere for another car to be besides on the road, as we were. After the first curve, all of a sudden we see a bright blue light flash through the car. I saw it on the trees in front of me, and behind me when I looked in the door mirror, then it was gone. Like cop lights, but without any red or headlights behind us. Just for 1 second. No sound. No other cars in front or behind us. And we're only going 30 miles per hour. All three of us saw it. The exact same thing. It really freaked me out because I'm a very logical, rational person, and I can say this is the only experience I've had my whole life that I can't explain. Also, there are 2 wooden crosses beside the road where a tractor-trailer crashed and 2 people died in that spot. I remember that accident because it tore up the highway where the semi jackknifed, and that section had to be repaved. I don't believe in ghosts or aliens or anything like that, and if my mom and daughter hadn't seen this too, I would have convinced myself I was seeing things and probably never even mentioned it to anyone. So my theory is, we drove through a glitch in the matrix and saw the emergency lights from that accident years ago. As crazy as that seems, it makes as much sense as anything else I can think of. What do you guys think? Has this happened to anyone else? Story 15. It never occurred to me that this experience may have been some sort of glitch, but I have no logical explanation, so I'm curious to hear what y'all think. In 2010, I suddenly got a migraine that lasted 2.5 months. To preface, I was 37 at the time, married, homeschooled my 2 kids, didn't drink, didn't do drugs of any kind. I took a group of kids to a concert, and the next night I felt like a headache was coming on, so I took some ibuprofen. I never get headaches. In fact, up until that point the last headache I remembered having was when I was a teenager. I also haven't had one since this incident. The intensity was increasing, and the ibuprofen didn't help, so I took some Tylenol. A couple of hours later I took a leave. Then aspirin. I figured this was triggered by the spring cleaning, aka stirring up dust, I had been doing, or possibly even from the concert, although I had always been a frequent concert goer still. Maybe a little of both. I went to bed early thinking a good night's sleep will fix it. It did not. The next morning my headache had intensified, to say the least. I can only describe it as it felt like someone squeezing my brain, wringing it out like a kitchen sponge. And this was constant. It never stopped. Less than 24 hours from the onset, and I couldn't eat, sleep, or stand up for longer than a few seconds. Oddly enough, bright lights and loud noises didn't bother me, but that's probably because my pain was consistently above a 10, so anything above that probably wouldn't have been noticeable. I went to multiple doctors and specialists who performed many tests, including a spinal tap 0/10 do not recommend, but every test and scan was normal. I made 3 trips to the ER, but apparently hospitals won't admit just for pain management, so I was always sent home with a cocktail of various pills that did absolutely nothing except fuck me up to the point I would pass out, which may have been the ER's intent. For the first couple of weeks, I thought I was dying. After the 3rd week I prayed I was. I had never experienced anything even remotely close to this level of pain in my life, not before or after, and it should be noted that I gave birth 100% naturally, and I have also passed a kidney stone. I didn't know I had that was about half the size of a pencil eraser, at home, without any type of pain reliever. Just to give y'all an idea of my tolerance level. I was diagnosed as having a migraine of unknown origin. As much as I wanted an accurate diagnosis, I wanted relief even more. I had lost 30 pounds from not eating, and when I was able to eat, I wasn't able to hold it down. The doctors in my area pretty much said they couldn't help me anymore. They were frustrated that their tried and true methods didn't even touch my pain, and I'm sure some of them thought I was faking, although no one ever said that to me. I hurt so bad I just wished for death. I swear I'm getting to the glitch. I wanted to give the backstory and the surrounding circumstances, so y'all have a complete understanding of the entire event. 2 months in, and my mom had found a doctor who specializes in migraine treatment and management. I called for an appointment, and they wanted to see me that afternoon. Their office was about 40 miles away. My husband couldn't leave work, my kids weren't driving yet, and my mom lived in the same town as the doctor, so there wasn't enough time for her to come pick me up. I had to drive myself. Note, I hadn't taken any meds since around 9 p.m. the night before, which was about 15 hours prior. I drove a Saturn Vue, which is an SUV. I went by myself and never thought twice about it. Here's the thing though, about 15 miles into the trip, I felt like I blacked out because the pain was so intense. I don't think I ever actually lost consciousness though because I was driving, then I was suddenly in the very back of the vehicle laying down. I don't recall crawling back there, and I certainly never pulled over and stopped. These were country roads though, and I remember sort of coming to and looking out the windows. I could see the trees as I passed by. At some point I sat up and saw my mom's friend's house and noticed that her car wasn't there and her yard needed to be mowed. I laid back down, and the next thing I remember is parking at the doctor's office. I was driving again. I didn't tell the doctor because I was afraid he'd think I was crazy, especially since no one could pinpoint the cause of my migraine. I told my mom, and it worried her because I guess she thought I was crawling around inside my vehicle when I should be paying attention to the road. My husband was always an inconsiderate dick, so he didn't believe me, ex-husband now, so I just stopped sharing my story. I knew how fantastic it sounded, and I knew people would think I was hallucinating due to the pills or the pain, and maybe I was, I don't know. But what I do know is my memory of riding in the back of that SUV, so I could rest while someone or something else did the driving, is incredibly vivid and likely saved my life. I'd love to hear opinions. Sorry for the length. I tend to be quite wordy, but I wanted to give as much info as possible.